So we're back at the winery. This morning we're going to see some action, but before we do, I'd love to hear your background, because we didn't really talk about that yesterday. How you got to wine and where you came from, because it's an interesting journey, and I'm sure
Yeah. I mean, how I got to wine is, I think a lot of people share the same story. But I became fascinated in it even as a kid, although I didn't really know what wine was, but I was still fascinated in it. I sort of as magic, taking a grape and coming out with something very different on the other end. And that kind of brings me to what's been my other parallel professional career. In amateur life, I'm a father and a life partner. Where I'm supposed to be a professional is in some of the other things that I do, which is in high tech. My father's a computer scientist. So from an early age, I knew a lot about technology. And when I wanted to fully move to Israel, because I'd been going back and forth for a while, fully moved to Israel, a mentor of mine said, high tech, you're entrepreneurial by nature, that's what you should be doing. And I said, well, there's no job called entrepreneur with a salary associated with it, and I already had 2 kids. And he said, just go. And so that's what I did, and thank God, one thing led to another, and under the sort of the law of serendipity, and very quickly got introduced into one company and worked with them, and then another company, and 20 years, more than 20 years later, 22 years later, here we are. So I've been involved in a broad range of tech startups.
Yes. Long bio.
Yeah, long. Yeah, they
They
scared me. A lot of them were failures, but yeah, failing is
but failing is learning.
Pride as well. Yeah,
exactly.
So I played every role that there is to play: entrepreneur, founder, co-founder, CEO, executive chairperson, investor, angel investor, VC investor, mentor, board member, advisor, all of those things. Right now I'm chairman of one software company, angel investor in a few others, and I'm involved with a group of people trying to pull together a new kind of VC fund here.
So you're doing 2 dramatically different things. I mean, with your tech world and then this.
Well, I see that as right. I see them as completely the same, which people look at me like I'm kooky.
Yeah.
So in Silicon Valley, the connection is, people in Silicon Valley will have a huge exit, and then as an ego trip, they'll buy a winery or something.
Right.
So they could say they'd have a winery. They don't usually work in it. So, I clean the floors here. And, for me, the parallels are very clear. Not just parallels, the interconnectedness is very clear, which is that you start off with some basic ingredients, and over a period of anywhere from 6 to 18, 22 months, you're supposed to create something.
Yeah.
And so many things can go wrong along the way. And, it's interesting. Somebody gave me a parallel, without even realizing it, they gave me a parallel between today's high-tech world and wine. So the guy said, I don't know, use too much of a coarse language, but I'm directly quoting from this guy who's one of the top wine people in the States. And I just sat with him last week, and we had a great reaction from him to our wine, so that all worked well. But he said, the goal is not to sell a bottle of wine. The goal is to have the person who buys that wine piss out that wine, because that means that they've really drunk the wine. Because otherwise you could have a bottle of wine sitting on a shelf somewhere, and even somebody bought it, it's sitting, who knows.
2 years later.
You want to make wine that people really want to drink. And he said, what's the sign you've really succeeded? So after that intro from him with the pissing out the bottle of wine, I was like, I didn't know where to go with that.
Yeah, it's a topper.
So I said, how do you know you've really succeeded? He said, when they've pissed out the second bottle of wine. To get the first bottle of wine, okay, somebody gave it to them, they needed a bottle of wine, whatever. That they liked it enough and they bought the wine again, then you've succeeded. There you go.
I'm going to buy it.
Okay, good. Then you've succeeded. So, and very, very similar in the high-tech world. And I think I have to write this up. Very, very similar in the high-tech world. To get somebody to use your app, let's say it's an app, to use your app once, right? It means you got to them through Facebook, you got to them through wherever it was, that you cajoled them into clicking on install. Now, clicking on install doesn't mean that you actually have used it, right? And that's the pissing out the bottle of wine analogy. They have it sitting there on their phone or whatever, or on their computer, and they actually have to use it. Well, that's just to get people to do that is a massive achievement. But the difference between that and success is when people use it a second time. Okay. So that's the exact parallel between making wine, as well as, of course, everything around innovation and how do you differentiate the wine you're making from the ocean of wine that's out there. What drives you to do, what you do, and so on. And also very similar to high-tech startups, it's not about the money. Whereas if you wanted to make money, you wouldn't go into high-tech startups. Yes, there is a chance you can make some money, but most people don't. That's the brutal reality. And if you just wanted to be wealthy, you would go work at an investment bank or whatever. You wouldn't do a high-tech startup. And very similar, wineries, long-term, build a tremendous amount of value in their name, in their brand, and it can be financially successful as well. But that's not why you do it.
For the love. For the wine, for the love, for the earth, for the air. Yeah, no, great, it's beautiful, and it's, I love your feeling up here. It really feels beautiful to be up in these mountains, and it's a way of life,
Yeah.
It's like being a farmer, kind of. So how many years now the winery's been?
So we started it formally in the end of 2011. Our first harvest was the summer of 2012. That first summer, we brought in enough grapes to yield us about 15,000 bottles, and learned a lot. A lot of sleepless nights during trying, first-time winemakers. And then the following harvest, we upped it at about 25,000 bottles, and then 50,000 bottles. And now we're at about 80,000 bottles, which is about 50,000 plus minus of ours. And we do also make wine for other wineries. We make around 30,000 bottles for other wineries. One of the best known wineries that we make wine for is a winery from Napa called Covenant, which is a well-known winery in Napa.
I feel like I've seen that.
And the winemaker there, proprietary winemaker, his name is Jeff Morgan. Very well-known guy, very respected guy in the wine industry. And he discovered his Israel side, his Jewish side, over recent years. Started visiting Israel and so on and so forth. His daughter now lives in Tel Aviv. And about 3 years ago, about 3 years ago, he said, I want to make wine in Israel. Went to all different wineries looking for his home, and he found his home here. We've learned a tremendous amount from him. He visits usually around 3-4 times a year. So what happens is he'll bring grapes to here. He'll give, a protocol saying, this is what's supposed to happen. We execute that. He depends on our staff. And then he'll come a few times a year just to check up that everything's going well.
He sells it under his label.
Yep. He created a new label called Covenant Israel.
Wow. Great.
And his wine in the States is like very high-end wine. He sells, $75 a bottle, $70 a bottle. Kind of expensive.
Yeah. That's pretty good company to be.
Yeah, and he's very proud to tell people that he makes the wine here and stuff. So that's part of our business model as well.
So thank you so much. It's been really great. It's been a great trip, and we're heading to Spot now to see some graffiti. So we'll top off our trip that way.